Hey there, camera fans. Today I want to talk about the Sigma 24-70 art lens for the EF mount cameras and go over a couple of aspects of it that I think are great for a lot of people. First, how you can adapt it to an RF series camera and how well that works, and then how well it performs optically and the build quality and things like that, how well it fits into a growing kit, especially if you're new, and a great combo kit that you can get online that I definitely recommend because it costs the same price as just the lens itself, but includes a whole bunch of extra goodies, which I will briefly go over as well in the video. I think that kind of a kit, as well as this lens, greatly benefits the hobbyist who's just trying to build out a kit, or even if you're starting to become a professional, but you haven't been doing this for years yet, so you don't have this wide assortment of lenses and you may not have a huge budget to go out and buy a ton of expensive glass, so you're having to make decisions about where do I get the best bang for my buck, what lens is the most versatile that delivers really good quality for the money, and in the case of getting a kit with a whole bunch of extra stuff in it, that really helps build out your camera bag without breaking the bank. So this is obviously a slightly older version of the Sigma art lens, not like the newer versions that are available for the Sony E-mount, but my experience with this is that it worked just as well with a EF to RF adapter on it. The only drawback of it is you can tell just by looking at this is a very wide lens in the body, and it's heavy. I think it's a little over 1,000 grams. It's almost 2 pounds. And it's long, and when you fully extend it to zoom into 70 millimeters, it's a fairly long lens, especially by the time you have the lens hood on, as you can see here. And you can imagine adding another inch to that with the EF to RF adapter. You definitely feel that while you're walking around with the camera. One of the ways that I tested this lens was to bring it to a science center with my family one afternoon, and we were there for several hours. So it wasn't too bad carrying the camera around for hours on end, but obviously if you were going to do street photography or if you were going to some other event that you were going to be at for a long time, you may want a lighter lens. You could definitely feel the weight of this. However, the build quality on this is excellent. Now, I don't have a ton of experience with the L series Canon glass, because it's often kind of prohibitively expensive, and so I can't comment a whole lot on how the build quality of this compares to those lenses. I assume the build quality on those is excellent, but of my experience thus far, I've been doing hobby photography for many years, and in the last year or so decided to get serious about it and really learn as much as I can and build out a kit and everything. This is among the highest build quality lenses that I have ever used. It feels very solid. It's an all metal construction. The zoom twisting motion is extremely smooth. It just feels quality. The focus ring feels excellent to twist back and forth, and I like that. You have 2 switches on the side to control auto and manual focus, and whether you want the optical stabilization. Now for me, I'm using a Canon EOS R. The fact that this has the lens stabilization is really helpful because the EOS R is not a camera body that has the IBIS in it. And so this is the only way to get stabilization. That's helpful. Now this says that it will do up to 3 stops of stabilization. That's not as powerful as some of the Tamron lenses that offer 5. Canon's own RF higher-end lenses that have stabilization also claim to offer 5 stops, so it's not as strong as that. But I will say that I did get, in my test shots in low light scenarios, usable shots down to about a 16th. In some cases, I think I got like a 1/6 of a second shutter speed. Those were a little hit or miss, but I could fairly reliably get, as long as the subject wasn't moving, I could get about a 1/6 of a second with this. So I consider that as good as I really need. The extra 2 stops theoretically you could get of stabilization on a different lens, I don't know how helpful that would be, because often I run into a scenario of your subject is moving. When I was at the Science Center, we were trying to get some photos of fish swimming around in the tanks and other animals and things, and there you run into the issue. The lighting was pretty dim in a lot of the fish and aquarium areas, and even at f2.8, with the optical stabilization on, I kept running into a scenario where the fish were moving too fast, that if my shutter speed went too low, everything was blurry. And so I had to opt instead, of course, for a little bit higher ISO. But anyway, I won't belabor that point. It's nice to have it for sure, especially if you're doing night shots and things. This is my first 24-70 lens. I had the 24-105 kit lens with the Canon EOS R originally. That's a wonderful focal range, of course. Covers almost every scenario I would be in most of the time, but two things about that lens bugged me. One, I just found that it had a very soft image quality, even stopped down, that a lot of photos, when I looked at them after the fact, I was kind of like it didn't do anything for me. It was certainly better than my iPhone. I'm not going to claim it was on, par with that, but it just wasn't as sharp as I'd hoped it would be. And when you're spending the kind of money to get a camera like the EOS R, I was kind of unimpressed to a degree with the image quality. And it drew me to using primes a lot to get that kind of sharpness that I was looking for. This, it only goes up to 70 millimeters instead of 105, but well worth it, because this image quality, I would say, is on par with any of the primes that I have currently. I have a 35 and a 50 millimeter prime that I use a lot. And so I don't feel like I'm making a sacrifice with this. Of course, it's not quite as fast. It caps out at f2.8 instead of 1.8, but still. I think that's great. And the fact that Sigma includes a lens hood, that might seem like a silly thing to be excited about, but I've gotten disappointingly accustomed in Canon's ecosystem to the fact that they only give you a lens hood on the L series lenses, which I don't own any. All of the consumer grade lenses, you have to buy your own. And at that, they want to charge $40+ for a lens hood, and I'm like, it's a piece of plastic. So I've gone with off brands like JJC and things like that, and they've worked fine. But it is annoying just that you have to find your own lens hood. So dealing with a lens manufacturer that does agree that it just is standard to include something like that is nice. The lens came in a really nice padded bag that you can slide right in here for travel and zip it shut. That's great. It's not something I've had on any of the other lenses that I've had thus far, so thank you, Sigma, for being considerate like that. It's a great first impression when you're opening the box on a lens that this is this expensive, to just feel like they've considered you as the customer, even down to that degree, that the first thing you notice about the lens is that. I think that's great. Briefly, before I talk about image quality and some of my experiences with the lens, I'll go into some of the stuff that came in the kit that I got. So of course this lens is about $1,100 in that range, and I found a seller, Focus Camera LLC, on Amazon that was selling, and I believe they're still selling, this lens in a kit that costs exactly the same as just the lens does, but it comes with things like this little pack here that has the lens blower to get dust off of your lens. It's got spray, it's got extra cleaning cloths. That's just a nice thing to throw in a camera bag. I didn't happen to have a blower at the moment. I got rid of my last one because it wasn't working right, so it's nice to have another one. It came with a Koa sling bag. The quality's okay. It's not like a super bag that I would have spent a lot of money on, but as a free throw-in, I think that's nice. It's got a main compartment here that's about big enough for your camera, with a small lens to lay across, or if you take the lens off, you could put them side by side. And it's got a front pocket with a few different mesh areas for things like extra batteries, extra SD cards, stuff like that, cleaning cloths that I have found useful. And the only negative thing I would say about this bag is, since they put the handle on the top here, see how it wants to lift the front flap? The only thing holding it shut is these plastic clasps. I haven't had an issue with it, but one day when I was carrying this heavy Sigma lens around with me, it occurred to me, if these plastic clips failed while I'm carrying it, this could go like this and dump all my stuff right out. That wouldn't be ideal. If I was shopping for just a camera bag, I might opt for something a little higher end than this, but again, as a free throw-in, certainly it's nice to have it. They also included this little tabletop tripod. I haven't had a lot of use for this yet because I just don't find myself in scenarios where I need something like that, but if you're going to do videos and you're not using a full tripod like I do, and you just want to mount this nearby in front of you, that's pretty cool to have as well. They also gave me 2 SanDisk Pro SD cards, 64 gig. That's a great feature. I already have 2 cards, but now I have 4 of them, so that's great. And probably my favorite thing that they included is the USB dock for Sigma Art lenses. So that's the way that you can make adjustments to the autofocus through the software on your computer by USB connecting it. You mount the lens onto this and then you connect this to your computer. And the other thing it can do, of course, is when there's firmware updates for your lens, this is how you download them into the lens. I did connect it and I played with that software just to try it. I didn't end up needing it because the lens already had the latest firmware, but this adapter in itself is $50 normally, and so for this to come in the kit for the same price as just the lens normally, that's awesome, on top of all the other stuff provided. So definitely check that out on Amazon. If you're thinking of this lens, that's a no-brainer to just get all this extra stuff. Even if you don't need everything in it, why not? So the two major areas that I tested this lens in terms of image quality. I went out for an afternoon doing just some landscape-ish type photography. I went to a cool location where I saw a nice cityscape of downtown and took a few shots of that at f8 and f11, and I was impressed at the quality in the buildings, the distant windows, and just things like that. Even on some of my primes, I haven't always gotten that level of detail from edge to edge on the frame, so I was very impressed with how well it resolved at all of the focal lengths. I tried it at about 35 millimeters, and then I also zoomed all the way into 70 and got some shots of the cityscape, and they were still very sharp, and that impresses me because on a lot of zoom lenses that I've used, people always say when you zoom all the way in, the image starts to become really soft and the quality degrades a lot, and I didn't really notice that happening to a big degree on this, which is great. Then, as I said earlier, I took it to a science center with me, with my family, and that really let me put it through its paces a lot because I was in low light scenarios where I really was testing that f2.8 and the optical stabilization, how well that worked. In some cases, photographing moving animals, that was a good idea of like how well does the autofocus work on this EF adapter. I can report that it worked great, especially on continuous autofocus mode. Had no issues there. The autofocus was quick. It seemed to decisively get where it needed to go, and I didn't have a whole lot of issues. The only time I ran into a problem was on some of the animals that were behind glass cases, like snakes and frogs and things. It sometimes had a little bit of trouble differentiating between the glass and the things behind them, but I've had that on other lenses and cameras before. That's just a thing with shooting through glass. It's tricky. So occasionally I had a little trouble with this in there, and the low light probably didn't help. But anywhere else I have shot this, where the lighting was better, outdoors, etc., the autofocus works really well. I've shot some videos with this. The continuous autofocus locked right onto my eyes and seemed to do a pretty good job there as well. So even though this isn't marketed as a video lens and it's a little heavy for it, in a pinch, it does a great job. And, having that 24 to 70 focal range for video is really flexible. So I'll share some images that I got from the experience. There's one I took of an eagle fairly close up. When I got back home and looked at it on the screen, like wowed by the level of detail around the eye and the feathers on the face. I got some shots of displays of lions. There was a T-Rex on display. Just a really cool experience with it. And like I said, after carrying it around for a couple hours, I did feel that weight, but honestly, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I thought my wrist was going to hurt carrying the camera for a couple hours with that, and it wasn't too bad. I did also go to a paid shoot. I offer photography services in addition to my other writing and website-related services that I generally do for a living. But I did do a photo shoot for a client where they had to go through, I was on kind of a guided tour through the whole HQ, was going department to department and getting representative photos for the website and all that. And I brought quite a few lenses with me. Wasn't really sure what I was going to need because that was a setup where I wasn't clear on exactly what I was walking into until I got there. But I ended up leaving all of the other lenses in the bag. I started with this on my EOS R and left it there the whole time. The image quality was great. It handled well enough in some of the dimmer situations. I did have my tripod, which I used a couple of times, and this with the tripod was perfect. And that focal range of 24 to 70, I did have to punch into 70 a couple of times, but I never found myself in that shoot in a scenario where I needed more than 70. So it was simpler to just leave the lens on the camera, and that was awesome. But anecdotally, I would say that this lens is excellent for a variety of people. you know, it's a bit pricey at $1,100, but compared to L series RF glass, which is often between $2,000 and $4,000, if you're a hobby shooter, this focal range, you could get away with just using this lens most of the time on your camera, and then you're not having to buy a zillion lenses. Because I find that the image quality is on par with primes that I've used, then you could replace 3 primes basically with this. So that $1,100 price tag may not be as bad as it originally seems when you think of it as you're not having to buy 3 separate lenses that might have been, you know, $200 to $500 each necessarily. So it's great for that if you're getting into being a professional and you have the problem that all starting off professionals probably have, which is I haven't shot a whole bunch of jobs yet to have made a ton of money. You know, I don't have the funds to just go out and buy a ton of really expensive glass, but I need image quality that is better than a kit lens, that is better than some of the lower end offerings that Canon has. This, I think, is a wonderful compromise there of it's a little bit more within reach financially. It's justifiable, like I said, because it replaces potentially 3 primes, and it gets you a professional level image quality. My client was happy with everything I took with this lens. When I edited everything in Lightroom, none of the images disappointed me. I was never like, oh man, that was too soft, or it wasn't this or that. I never found like it was the lens limiting me. If a shot didn't come out like I wanted to, it was clearly my mistake. You know, in the shot, and that's perfect. You want a lens where, you know, when the shot doesn't come out, it's probably your fault and not the lenses. So I can speak very highly of this lens. Like I said in the beginning, I think the only real fault of this lens is that it's so big and heavy. And that would be if I was going out for a day of shooting and I was deciding what lens do I want to put on the camera. I think the main reason I would not choose this lens sometimes would be because of the weight. But for every other reason, like, it makes sense to keep that on the camera a lot of the time. The focal range is excellent. The f2.8 solid throughout is great, and the image quality is just spectacular. So check out, I put the link to where you can find this in the description. Check it out if you're interested in this lens. Don't let the fact that Canon RF glass is so expensive stop you. You can get an adapter and use this EF version of the lens really easily. And what I like about the EF 2 is that they have adapters that will take EF lenses into the Sony system. So even if you're going to switch systems or you have a couple cameras, you could conceivably still use this lens on those setups and save yourself even more money of not having to keep buying more lenses for each system. So thanks for watching. If you have questions, I will do my best to answer them. Put them below. If there's anything I didn't cover in this video, I'm going to continue shooting with this lens and building my experience with it, so hopefully I can talk more about it in other videos. If you liked this video, please give me a like. If you want to see more content like this, I review all kinds of products and talk about tech things, and I do plan to be talking a whole lot more about photo-related things going forward, so subscribe if you want to see more of that. And otherwise, I'll catch you guys in the next video.